to The Drummer and the Great Mountain, a podcast where we share effective tips and practices for working with adults ADD, ADHD in a natural, effective way without the use of medications. Each episode, join me, your host, Batman Saram, along with the author of The Drummer and the Great Mountain, Michael Joseph Ferguson. Join Michael and myself in an interactive discussion of sharing our stories as we journey together in transforming what can be the gift of being what we call hunter types. This podcast is intended to be your audio companion to the book written by Michael, who joins me each episode where we both will strive to foster dialogue, give you our personal insights, and share both of our experiences on this similar path that we are all on. Our intention and hope is that along with the book, this podcast gives you an additional perspective as you listen to us delve deeper into each chapter of the book to give you even more tools to go along with what it is that you are reading. Visit us at drummerandthegreatmountain.com to purchase the book and look for more tools, tips, and updates, as well as giving us feedback on this podcast. Join our growing global community of creative types, entrepreneurs, and out-of-the-box thinkers on our shared journey. Welcome to The Drummer and the Great Mountain podcast.
Welcome, everyone. Thanks for tuning in. I'm your host, Michael Joseph Ferguson. How are you? Hope you're doing well. In today's episode, we will be talking about cold water immersion showers. So before you tune out and go, I'm not jumping into cold water the first thing in the morning, I'm going to specify that we're talking about a warm shower and a cold rinse. Little different, but we'll be talking about the neuroscience of cold water immersion therapy, why that can be supportive to us as hunter types, how it affects our dopamine levels. Talk a little bit about the science, but primarily we're going to be talking about how do you test it out? How do you see whether or not this actually supports you in greater alertness, greater effectiveness in the morning, and also that you can take good care of your health and your immune system. So the last episode, we talked about the power of the walk. This episode is about the power of the shower. And the reason why I'm doing this episode is we just had our shower worked on last week, and I had a couple days where I did not have a shower. Oh my gosh. Then I realized this one little thing in the morning made a huge difference in my focus level. So I'm fresh off the lesson of how important the cold water immersion shower is to your morning productivity. So stay tuned for that. Okay, a couple quick announcements. One is I would love to hear your voice on this podcast. So if you have a question you would like me to answer on the air, I'm going to leave a voicemail number and you can call and ask the question, and I will sift through those questions and include them at the beginning of the episode. I'll play the question or the win. Maybe you have a win that you would like to celebrate based on listening to this podcast. You can leave a message and I will sift through those, and those will become things that the questions I will answer in future episodes. So the phone number is 760-487-8773. That's in the US, 760-487-8773. And if you're outside the US, you have to dial the country code before you can get in. Obviously, I know you guys all know this. So if you have a win, you have a question, something that you would like me to cover in the episode, ideally something fairly specific would be nice. So I can spend maybe 10, 15 minutes on the episode talking about it. So again, 760-487-8773. I will leave that number in the episode notes. And one other note is I would like to build out our network of therapists that listen to this podcast who are familiar with the book. I know many of you, I get lots of notes from people buying books from the website saying their therapist recommended the book to them. So if you're one of those therapists, please reach out. Occasionally I get coaching clients that I want to send to a therapist, and they're always asking, do you have people that are familiar with this work that have this general perspective as well that you can recommend me to? So if that's you, please reach out, drop me an email at info@ drummerinthegreatmountain.com. And I also may be interested in talking to some therapists in future episodes to talk about things like anxiety, trauma, addiction, things that are outside the realm of me as a coach that I would like to have this conversation, and also to keep some kind of congruency with how we are approaching ADHD. So that would be a added benefit. So if that's you, please reach out, info@drummerinthegreatmountain.com. Okay, so cold water immersion showers. Let's talk about the challenge. So the challenge is we wake up in the morning sets the tone for the day, and we often wake up feeling fuzzy and sluggish, and we kind of just blur through the morning. And it may take half the day before we boot up and we're clear enough to do any planning, doing any mundane tasks, having any energy. Some of you just pop up out of bed, and that's great. But for most of us, it's a challenge. And so when we think about that challenge, the question is, what are some things we can do? Some of you go right to the coffee. That's hype yourself up. And what you're doing in that situation, and we'll talk about this in a second, is you're affecting your dopamine levels. And so one of the things that can be very useful, and I can speak from personal experience on this, is having a warm shower and then a cold rinse at the end of the shower. And we're going to talk about how that potentially affects your dopamine levels and your ability to focus, especially in the morning as you're getting yourself up and going. So before we get started, let's talk about the dangers. I'm not talking about sub-freezing cold waters that can lead to hyperthermia. You have to do your own research on this. If you have any heart conditions that would be adversely affected by this, please take this information, do your own research. I'm just sharing, I'll share some information, I'll share some studies about it. Please take caution if you have any health conditions that may be affected by this, okay? But we're talking about cold water, and we're talking about 50 to 60 degree water Fahrenheit, 10 to 15.5 degrees Celsius, okay? When I'm talking about cold water, that's the spectrum I'm talking about, okay? 50 to 60 degrees Fahrenheit, 10 to 15.5 degrees Celsius. So as I mentioned, I'm fresh off the lesson of how useful this particular strategy is. So not having a shower for close to a week, it reminded me just how important morning warm shower, cold rinse can be in your morning effectiveness. So someone introduced this to me when I was living in Kauai. That was the late 90s, early 2000s. And they were talking, I think Wim Hof was even around. He was obviously around, but I don't know if it was well known yet about kind of cold water immersion therapy. I know it's been around. I mean, people had been talking about it, but it was kind of on the fringes. But they were saying, you take a warm shower and then you turn the shower and you go to a very cold rinse for like a minute after. And it kind of seals the warmth into your body. It's the inverse of what you would think. You don't get the chills. You actually feel even warmer, and it kind of wakes you up in the morning. And I was like, okay, all right, I try it. And I tried it, and I was like, okay, well, it wakes me up. And it was like really hard at first. I was like, oh my gosh, this is tough. But after I did it for a while, I'm like, I just kind of got into the habit of it. And I didn't even think about it. So for years, I've been doing the same practice. And it wasn't until recently that, obviously, with Wim Hof, I've been kind of tracking his stuff for a while. So Wim Hof, actually, it's probably pronounced Vim, and tracking his work. And then recently, I was listening to an episode of the Huberman podcast, and he was talking about cold water immersion and how it affects dopamine levels. And it was fascinating to me, and I had not put that together before. So the neuroscience of this is that cold water immersion can increase your dopamine levels by up to 230%. And I will leave a link to the article, to the study that shows this, and the factors that they found out on it. And so what that means, though, is that when you do this, you're affecting one of the key things that create challenges with us as hunter types. It's the core of our wiring is less dopamine receptors, and requiring more dopamine, available dopamine, to do the focus, the motivation, to have what we need to overcome some of the challenges that we face. So that's a big deal. 230%, up to 230% increase in dopamine levels. Here's the key piece, though. Here's the clincher. After you get that initial, oh my gosh, it's so cold. After you feel that and your eyes pop out and you're like, oh my gosh, and you go through that after the stimuli is gone, your dopamine levels continue to rise slowly after the initial stimuli. So that means that you can have a warm shower, a cold rinse, and then throughout the morning, your dopamine levels potentially can continue to rise. So this has been my experience. I've experienced that when I do this, and again, this week, coming off of not having that, I can really feel the difference. There's just greater alertness and crispness in your consciousness after you do that. Now, some people, if you've got like access to like a cold stream or something like that, that's obviously even better. Given, the caveats that I mentioned earlier about your potential health issues, if you get too cold or if you have heart conditions that may be affected by it. But this is a big deal because this is something you can do for free that may take you a little time to get used to, but you can find your way into a practice that wakes you up in the morning and that can potentially give you a boosted productivity, energy, and ability to do mundane tasks earlier in the morning, whereas you may just kind of blur through morning, afternoon, and maybe just have 1 to 2 hours of good focus time, if that. So in our last episode, we talked about the power of the walk. That was really about you getting yourself out into the elements to wake yourself up. And this is another tool that you can do for free that's going to affect and directly address your dopamine levels. So for those of you who are not familiar with the Huberman podcast, Andrew Huberman is a neuroscientist from Stanford University. And he does a lot of explanation. He goes very much in depth into many of topics around neuroscience. And so this particular episode was on dopamine. And I believe either one of my coaching clients or one of you reached out and sent it to me, and it came out last September. And then I finally got around to listening to it, and it's excellent. There's so much good information, and it very much aligns with what we talk about on this podcast. And to be honest, there's times when I hear neuroscientists come out and they've got like new studies. I'm like, oh, okay, I got to go back and rewrite all this stuff. And I was very fortunate when I wrote the book that I focused my study on the brain chemistry of addiction and all of the findings out of that field, and I brought it into the field of ADHD. And so there's been a slow connecting of those dots that are now just kind of verifying a lot of things that I talk about in the book and what I've talked about in the podcast for many years. But one of the things he mentions in the episode is, for one, there's that slow, continuous rise in dopamine after the initial cold water, intensity that also gives you a spike of epinephrine and norepinephrine. But the rise is similar to the rise that cocaine gives you, but without the crash after. It's a sustained level of dopamine that stays for hours. So again, I would encourage you, if you haven't tried this out, if you're not familiar with cold water immersion therapy, it's definitely something to look at as far as ADHD support that's readily available to you. So it doesn't require long-term freezing cold water. Now, the benefits of how much and how long and how cold definitely vary from individual to individual. So test it out for yourself. But here's the process that I've been doing for a long time. So basically, it's just warm shower, comfortable shower. I definitely am not suffering in any way. It's just a normal shower. At the end of the shower, I flip the water to cold. And then, so here's the simplest way to do it. Take the warm shower, turn the shower head away from you, then turn on the cold water, turn it to cold water. Wait for the cold water to come through, so to feel it with your hand, and then turn it towards you and see if you can sustain the cold water for about a minute. Okay. And so initially you're going to be like, okay, I got to breathe. Okay. So just practice your breathing. See if you can just let yourself experience the cold. You'll really feel it. It gets easier the more times you do it. And so if you have the knobs, it's easy. You can just turn down the hot water and turn up the cold water. Or if you have the handle, you turn the handle around. Now, for some of you, I just experienced this because we got a new shower. The new shower, the settings on the shower are such that when I turn the new shower to cold, I don't get cold water. And I was like, uh-oh, this is a major deal. But then I looked online, I'm like, okay, I can. So most of you who have the one handle, there's a little Allen key that it's like a little, you just need an Allen wrench to turn. There's like a set screw usually on the bottom of the handle, and the handle comes off, and there's a little piece of plastic that comes out, and you can rotate that plastic. It's got little teeth on it. And the more, I believe for most showers, the more you rotate counterclockwise, you'll get more cold. And if you turn it clockwise, you get more heat. And then you put the handle back on again. So just get on YouTube and look up your shower, and they'll show you how to adjust it if you're not getting really cold water when you turn it. So then you just experience the cold water as best you can, and then you turn it off. Go on with your day. So the shock can be helpful. If you're not, again, make sure that there's no contraindications for you if you have any medical conditions. But it's that initial that can be, that's sort of the mechanism that kicks in. And so that starts the dopamine rise. Now, some of you may want to integrate some kind of mindfulness practice into this, so you become fully present with where the cold water is touching your skin, and just bring your full attention to that. But you don't have to. Pretty simple. Warm shower, cold rinse, see how you feel after. The one note I would say is avoid doing this at night. It's going to be stimulating for you, and it may keep you up. So this is a morning or afternoon kind of thing. It's definitely not something you want to do right before bed. Now, sometimes what I'll do is if I'm like in the afternoon, and this is very rare, but occasionally I'll just be really fuzzy and I'm like, I gotta get this one thing done. I cannot let this go past today. It has to get done today. I will hop in the shower and then do a cold rinse just because I know that will work. It's like it's better than coffee. I know that's going to wake me up enough to then I'll feel refreshed, and then I'll have another couple hours of functional focus time before dinner. So that's one way you can actually use this technique as again, another tool in the toolkit. It's so helpful to have these tools in your toolkit because it's hard living with this wiring. We're blessed in some ways and we're very cursed in others. And so we need tools like this to keep us on track so that we can be functional. We can bring our gifts out into the world. So test it out for yourself and see what you think. Let me know. Post to the podcast notes on the Facebook page, or drop me an email at info@drummerandthegreatmountain. I like hearing from you. I like getting that feedback loop. So let me know how it goes with you. So again, your task for the week is try this out. Warm shower, cold rinse. Be careful, no hyperthermia. Note your focus levels throughout the day after the shower. That's really the big thing, because at the end of the day, it's really about, were you able to be more productive, especially in the morning to early afternoon? Did it support your focus levels? Was there any improvement? And let me know. So that's it. I hope that was helpful to you. And until next time, be well.
Thanks for joining us. If you'd like to learn more about the book, The Drummer and the Great Mountain, visit drummerandthegreatmountain.com. To join us on social media, click the links at the top of the homepage. Help us spread the word. We're a small press and reviews really help. If you've been enjoying the podcast or the book, consider writing a review on iTunes, Amazon, Goodreads, or your podcast app. If you're new to the podcast and want to quickly get up to speed on the concepts we discuss, check out our free 5-day mini course. Visit drummerandthegreatmountain.com/mini course. If there's a topic you'd like us to cover on future episodes, we'd love to hear from you. Please send us an email at info@drummerandthegreatmountain.com.